I am not supposed to be in the warehouse at all. I am supposed to be in a fourth-floor office downtown, under white lights, fixing invoice mismatches and pretending not to notice how many payments our company makes to shell vendors with empty websites and disconnected phone numbers. But at 9:12 in the morning, my supervisor sends me across the river with a folder, a flash drive, and one sentence that tells me more than he means to. Get the signatures in person, and do not email anything from this batch. The company is called Halcyon Meridian Logistics. On paper, it moves medical equipment, food imports, and industrial storage materials between ports, rail spurs, and private distribution sites. In practice, it moves whatever rich clients need moved quietly. Expensive alcohol, artwork, sensitive server racks, sealed crates with customs exemptions, and things that come with instructions nobody writes down twice. I know that because I balance the ledgers after everyone else leaves. I know where the money goes, even when I do not know what sits inside the containers. For 3 weeks, I have been watching the same coded site name appear in expense reports. Site Cinder, repair costs, imported fixtures, bottled water deliveries, backup battery replacement, high-end kitchen maintenance, climate control service, Italian tile sealant, wine storage calibration, biometric lock support. None of it fits a normal storage warehouse. None of it fits a legal one either. When I asked my supervisor, he looked over my shoulder, lowered his voice, and told me to stop trying to understand every line item if I wanted to keep drawing a salary. This morning, the city already feels wrong before I leave the office. 2 ambulances sit across from the courthouse with back doors open, and nobody unloading anybody. A bus has stopped in the middle of the street even though the light is green. People are standing on the sidewalk looking at phones, not talking, just staring, and every few minutes one person steps away fast and starts walking with that clipped, private kind of speed people use when they have decided the day is turning bad and public manners no longer matter. I carry the folder down to the parking garage and drive east toward the industrial district. The radio keeps breaking between traffic updates and short emergency statements that say almost nothing. A hospital in the North End is temporarily limiting visitors. A school district closes early because of a staffing incident. A state health spokesperson says the public should avoid rumor and rely on official channels. Then the station cuts to music for 30 seconds before an anchor comes back on air with a voice that has already lost its normal rhythm. By the time I get off Harbor Avenue, the roads near the freight yards are packed with trucks idling at odd angles. One trailer is jackknifed across a side street. A man in a reflective vest is pounding on the cab door of his own rig, while another man inside keeps his face turned away and does not open up. 2 police cruisers crawl past me toward the overpass, lights on, no sirens. The whole district smells of diesel, wet concrete, and hot brakes. Warehouse 9 sits behind chain-link fencing and stacked containers. A long gray building with loading bays on one side and an office block on the other. I have only been here twice. Both times I was told to stay near the admin windows and let operations people handle operations. Today, the gate is open wider than usual, and a forklift is parked crooked near the entrance with one fork half raised, as if the driver got called away in the middle of a move. Lena Ortiz meets me inside before I even reach the office door. She runs dock scheduling and inventory control, and she always looks like she has already done 3 hours of work before other people remember to show up. Her dark hair is tied back, her sleeves are rolled, and there is grease on one wrist from moving pallet jacks herself because somebody always calls out when the work gets ugly. She sees the folder in my hand and shakes her head before I say anything. "You picked a bad day to visit," she says. "Richard is downstairs losing his mind. The loading crews want hazard pay. and one of the reefer drivers just bit a guard hard enough to leave teeth marks. I stop in front of her. "Bit him. I saw the blood on the vest," she says. "If you are here for signatures, get them fast and go home." There is no joke in her voice. That matters more than the words. Richard Vale is the regional finance director. Expensive shoes, expensive watch, soft hands, and the kind of face that always looks slightly annoyed that the world is not smoother for him. I know him from quarterly reviews and closed-door budget meetings, where he talks about discretionary resilience assets and executive continuity priorities. When I step into the ground floor office, he is yelling into a phone and pacing in front of the security glass, while a younger man in a suit stands beside him with a tablet and a face gone pale. I know the younger man too. Grant Heller, assistant controller, younger than me by a couple years, eager, careful, one of those men who calls senior management by title even when nobody is around. He sees the folder in my hand and comes straight over. "Good," he says too quickly. "You brought the amendment package." "I brought what Matt told me to bring," I say. "I need signatures and initials on 6 pages. Richard turns from the phone and snaps his fingers at Grant without looking at him. "Get him down here. Now." That phrase lands wrong immediately. Not "get the papers down here." Get him down here. Before I can ask what he means, something bangs against the security glass at the front office entrance. Hard enough to rattle the metal frame. Everyone in the room looks over at once. A warehouse guard is stumbling against the door from outside, one hand pressed to his neck, eyes wet and wide, leaving a red handprint on the glass. Behind him, another man in a bright orange dock vest hits him again from the side and tries to pull him away from the door by the shoulder and jaw in a way no healthy man would use. The guard slips down. The dock worker drops with him. Then 2 more bodies crash into both of them in a knot of arms, boots, and reflective tape. Richard backs up so fast he hits the desk behind him. "Close it," he says, although the door is already closed. "Martin, close every access point." Martin Kroll comes in from the hall with a shotgun held low and a ring of keys at his belt. He is the head of site security, mid-50s maybe, former military or former police or one of those men who never clarifies, because the effect is the same either way. He glances at the front glass once, not twice. Then he locks the interior office door, kills the hall lights with one switch, and moves to the camera monitor bank mounted beside the records cabinet. On the screens, I see the loading floor turning into something that has no shape yet, but is already worse than panic. Men are shoving each other near Bay 4. One forklift is still rolling with nobody seated in it, and clips a stack of wrapped pallets hard enough to spill boxes across the concrete. Somebody falls. Somebody else tries to pull him up and gets dragged sideways. One of the reefer trailers sits open with half a pallet of medical coolers still inside, and blood smeared on the threshold. The phone in Richard's hand is still connected. I hear a thin, distant voice speaking fast through the speaker. Not words I catch, just urgency. Richard stares at the monitor, then at Grant, then at me. And for 1 second, I understand exactly what kind of place this is. Not a warehouse with a secret under it. A secret with a warehouse built on top. "We are going below," Richard says. "Now." Lena appears in the office doorway from the hall before Martin can stop her. She has a hand truck handle in one hand and a box cutter in the other, though it looks more like she picked it up without thinking than because she believes it can solve anything. Behind her is a woman I do not know well, slim, tired-looking, wearing a Navy service polo with the logo of an HVAC subcontractor on the chest. I have seen her signature on maintenance billing forms. Nisha Patel, the woman who serviced Site Cinder's climate controls 3 times last month. Lena takes in the room, the monitors, the blood on the glass, and the way Richard is standing near a wall keypad I have never noticed before. "You are opening it, aren't you?" she says. Richard does not answer her. He keys a 6-digit code into the pad, then presses his thumb against a steel plate mounted flush with the wall paneling. Something heavy unlocks behind the drywall with a sound I feel through the floor more than hear. One of the filing cabinets shifts inward on concealed tracks, revealing a narrow service elevator door painted the same gray as the wall. Nobody says anything for 1 beat. Then Grant steps toward it. Martin covers the office entrance. Richard points at me, at Lena, at Nisha. "Inside," he says. Lena plants her feet. "Who else knows about this?" "Inside," Richard says again, sharper now. "Or stay up here and make your own choices." Outside the front office, glass, a body slams against the frame again. Not the same guard now, a woman from shipping. I know her face from inter-office mail drops. Half her cheek is streaked with blood, and her jaw is working wrong, open and shut, open and shut. She sees us through the glass and hurls herself at it with both hands. That settles it. Martin opens the elevator cage. Richard goes first, Grant after him. Nisha hesitates long enough to glance at Lena, then steps in. I follow because every other option is getting worse by the second. Lena comes last, still glaring at Richard, as if she can hold him responsible by force of eye contact alone. Martin backs in, jabs the door control, and the hidden panel seals us into darkness for 1/2 second before emergency strips along the elevator frame come on in cold blue lines. The platform drops fast enough to make everyone widen stance. There is no music, no display, no floor count. Just a steel box descending under a warehouse that should not have this much depth beneath it. I can hear something banging above us through the shaft walls. Boots, maybe. Fists, maybe. Heavy impacts that travel down the metal ribs and into the soles of my shoes. Richard uses that ride to recover his posture. He smooths his tie with one hand and says, "This is a continuity site. It is secure. Nobody touches anything without direction." Lena turns to him. "Direction from who? You?" He looks at her the way men like him always look at workers they need for one moment and intend to dismiss the next. "From the people who funded it." Nisha lets out a short breath through her nose. "You mean the people who made me service the air scrubbers through a fake maintenance contract and never once told me what I was keeping alive?" Grant flinches at that phrasing. I notice because he is close enough that his elbow brushes mine when the lift shudders and slows. He smells like aftershave and office air, out of place among dust, metal, and the faint cold scent rising from below. The doors open on a level that looks nothing like a bunker in my head. It looks like a hotel corridor built by somebody who fears public collapse and refuses to give up private luxury. Warm, recessed lighting, stone tile floors, matte black trim, a framed print on the wall that has no business being underground. On one side, a lounge with cream-colored sofas bolted discreetly to the floor. On the other, a glass-front wine room lit soft amber from within. Past that, a kitchen with imported appliances, a polished island, and more bottled water stacked under the counter than I keep in my apartment all year. For a moment, nobody moves because the place is too clean for the noise above us, too still, too controlled. Then Richard turns at once, practical and terrified. "Martin, seal the lift. Grant, security and comms with me. Owen, bring the documents. Lena and..." He glances toward Nisha, searching for her name, because of course he has approved invoices from her company without once learning her face. Maintenance. Check systems room. Lena does not move. My name is Lena. Good for you, Richard says, and walks off. That is the moment she decides he is not going to survive this with her help. I can see it happen, not in some dramatic way, just in the way her mouth sets and stays there. I follow Richard and Grant into the security room because I still have the folder and because I need to understand what I just stepped into. The room sits behind a concealed door off the hall, larger than the office above, with 3 walls of monitors, a server rack humming in one corner, radio chargers, battery shelves, and a central desk with laminated maps of the warehouse property, the surrounding blocks, and several routes marked in red grease pencil, leading out toward the river and North Interstate. Richard snatches the folder out of my hands without thanks and throws it onto the desk beside a sat phone cradle. The phone itself is missing. Grant sits at a terminal and starts bringing feeds online. One by one, the monitors fill with views from loading bays, fenced yard corners, office halls, stairwells, the truck scale, and 2 exterior poles aimed down Harbor Avenue. The city is coming apart faster than any of the radio statements admitted. Cars are abandoned at angles in both directions. People are running in groups or alone. One city bus sits with the front windshield cracked, and both doors open while figures stumble around it, dragging hands across the body panels. Smoke is already rising beyond the overpass. In the nearest yard camera, 3 warehouse workers are trying to force the main gate chain with a forklift, while 6 or 7 others hammer against the sides of the cab and cling to the lift arms until the whole machine lurches sideways and stalls. How long is this place provisioned for? I ask before I can stop myself. Richard does not answer right away. He is opening drawers, checking cabinets, looking for that missing sat phone. Grant glances at me, then away. I ask again. How long? Grant says it because Richard won't. At listed occupancy, about 5 days full utility, maybe 7 if water is controlled, and the generator above keeps taking load without interruption. I look at the room, then back at him. 5 days? This whole place is built for 5 days? Richard rounds on him. At listed occupancy for primary use. There are additional contingencies. What is listed occupancy? I ask. Grant swallows once. 6. There are already 6 of us below, if you count Martin. And that is without any executive family members or outside recovery team or whatever primary use means. Richard knows I have done that math because he stops pretending this is a shelter and says the truth in the ugliest version that fits his mouth. This is not a colony, he says. It is a transition site. Above us, something booms so hard, dust shakes from a vent grill in the corner. The first hour underground is spent learning how much comfort can hide how little actual survival planning got done. Yes, there are soft chairs, imported olives, expensive coffee sealed in tins, a steam shower in the master suite, shelves of wine laid on rubber cradles, and a walk-in freezer full of vacuum-packed steaks that mean nothing without steady power. But there are only 8 bed spaces, 2 of them fold-down cots in a room meant for staff. There are no real medical supplies beyond first aid kits and anti-nausea tablets. The gun cabinet holds 3 pistols, 2 shotguns, and less ammunition than Martin keeps in his truck upstairs. The water reserve is large enough to impress a client on a tour and smaller than I want once I see the gauge numbers with my own eyes. Nisha comes back from the systems room, wiping dust off her hands with a shop towel. The scrubbers are live. Batteries are fine. Sewage ejector is fine. Climate loop is fine for now. If the rooftop intake shutters above get jammed or the external generator loses fuel, the comfort part of this place is over fast. Lena has found the pantry inventory by then and spreads it on the kitchen island. Imported crackers, dried fruit, high-end canned fish, bottled sauces, vacuum-sealed pasta, wine, sparkling water, gourmet chocolates, meal bars, preserved meats, and enough coffee to carry a board meeting through a nuclear scare. Almost no plain rice, almost no beans, no bulk flour, no baby formula, no simple broad-stroke survival planning. It is a bunker designed by men who expected to wait in style, while someone else fixed the world above. Martin locks down the inner hall doors, hands one pistol to Lena, one to Nisha, keeps a shotgun, and gives me a flashlight and a metal pry bar, because the gun count does not stretch far enough to make me useful in the way he prefers. I am fine with that. I do not own a gun. I have never fired one outside a range trip with a college friend 14 years ago, and I do not intend to become heroic just because a floor of stone and steel now separates me from whatever is on the loading dock. Grant keeps trying the sat phone cradle, then a drawer safe in Richard's suite, then the encrypted terminal in the comms room. Richard follows him, angry in bursts, scared in silence. I stay close enough to hear without looking like I am listening, which is one of the few things accounting trains into a man without him naming it. People say more around numbers men because they assume the numbers are all he is taking in. By noon, the public networks are gone. The bunker still gets fragments through hardline relay and 2 rooftop antennas, but nothing stable. City emergency traffic is clipped, overlapping, and full of interrupted units. There are orders to establish perimeters, then orders to abandon perimeters, then half-heard instructions about bites, restraint failures, contamination, transport crashes, and hospitals no longer accepting intake. One state official comes on a television feed looking gray and stiff behind a podium, says citizens should shelter in place, and is pulled off camera mid-sentence when shouting breaks out somewhere behind the reporters. Lena eats standing up because sitting feels wrong to her while work remains. She makes everyone switch from bottled sparkling water to plain reserve tanks within 2 hours of getting underground. And when Richard protests, she tells him he can complain after he carries the next fuel can himself. He does not answer her because even he knows she is the only person here who can turn inventory into days instead of shelves. The first bad decision comes just after 1 in the afternoon. Somebody starts pounding on the freight elevator from above. At first it is faint, then heavier, then a pattern of 3 hits. Pause, 3 hits, pause. Martin brings the nearest elevator camera feed up on the security screen and zooms until the image pixels break apart. A man is crouched at the hidden wall panel in the office above, face smeared dark with blood that may be his or somebody else's, one hand slamming the drywall where the biometric plate sits. I know him. Pete Voller, senior warehouse clerk. He used to send me receiving discrepancies with neat little notes paper-clipped to the front, because he did not trust email chains either. Now he is gasping between blows and looking over his shoulder at the office door every few seconds while shapes move behind the frosted glass beyond him. He found it, Grant says. No. Martin says. He found the wall. Pete pounds again, then leans close enough to the camera mic that his voice comes through in rough bursts. Open it. Open the damn. I know you are. Richard, open it. Richard takes 1 step toward the console. Martin blocks him with an arm. Hold. Pete keeps talking. Not full sentences, just names, curses, begging. He says there are people in the office halls eating each other. He says 2 guards ran for the roof and got dragged down the admin stairs. He says he can hear something in the elevator shaft behind the wall, and if it gets through, he is dead. The room goes quiet in the wrong way, not peaceful. Just narrowed to that one camera, and the hand smearing the hidden panel red every time it misses the real contact plate. Lena says what everyone else is thinking. If we open it, whatever is with him can come down. Richard says he knows too much about the site. Martin says he is already making noise where noise matters. Nisha stands with both palms on the back of a chair. Eyes on the screen. Can the lift be called without opening the wall? Grant answers too fast again. No, not from that side. Not unless the interior accepts the auth sequence. I watch Pete stop pounding and press his forehead to the drywall for 1 second. Then he turns because the office door behind him moves. Just a little at first, then harder. The frosted pane bows inward, snaps, and a hand reaches through from the hall. Pete screams once. Real words gone now. Just sound. He swings a stapler at the arm, misses, stumbles, and disappears off camera as more shapes flood into the office. Martin kills the audio. Nobody says anything. Richard stares at the blank corner of the screen where Pete vanished and straightens his cuffs with 2 small, useless movements. I understand then that this place will break people by inches, long before it runs out of food. The afternoon passes in jobs because jobs keep us from sitting with what we saw. Lena turns the kitchen into a ration station and makes labels for every shelf with a marker from the office supplies. Nisha walks me through the utility room because she wants one more person who understands what Valve does, what in case she gets hurt. Martin takes Grant on a weapons and door control loop because no one trusts him alone, and Richard will not do manual work even now. I get assigned to the record safe, the digital archive, and any financial documents that might explain how to access reserves or external support. That is how I find the real bunker file. It is not in the security server. It is on Richard's encrypted drive in a folder named Client Hospitality. Cost categories, vendor records, maintenance contracts, concealed payroll, and a site brief marked for executive continuity planning. I print it because I do not trust screens once power becomes a question. The site was built under Warehouse 9 after a port bribery investigation 10 years ago. Officially, it is a cold storage expansion never completed. Unofficially, it is a protected hold site for senior partners, private clients, and priority persons during civil unrest, financial seizure, or transport disruption. Maximum intended stay, 72 hours, stretch window, 120 hours. Resupply model, on-site warehouse labor and contracted drivers to support above-ground generator, fuel lift, waste removal, and security perimeter. In other words, this place works only if the people above keep doing dangerous work for the people below. I keep printing. There is an appendix for extraction. Primary plan, executive convoy pickup through north loading ramp after stabilization. Secondary plan, concealed egress through storm utility tunnel to canal service outlet 3 blocks east. Tertiary plan, site denial if compromise is imminent. No details on that line, just 2 initials I do not know, and a reference to asset sanitization protocol. Buried deeper in the file is the worst part. Occupancy hierarchy, principals first, spouse or guest second, technical specialist third, security fourth, no allocation for clerical staff, warehouse staff, drivers, or custodial staff. A line I read 3 times says support personnel may be retained temporarily at site discretion to preserve continuity of operations. Retained temporarily. Not saved. Used. I take the pages straight to Lena, Nisha, and Martin in the kitchen because hiding it would make me Richard by degrees, and I do not have the appetite for that. Lena reads half the first page and says, "Of course." Not shocked. Just disgusted in a way that sounds older than this morning. Martin reads slower. When he finishes, he folds the pages once, neatly, and asks me where Richard is. I tell him security room. Martin walks there with the paper in hand and closes the door behind him. I do not hear the first minute of the conversation, but I hear the last part clearly enough through the wall. "You knew the fuel numbers," Martin says. Richard answers something lower. Martin again. "You knew this place is 5 days with luck, and less if half the systems go wrong." Then Richard, louder. "I knew what I was told to know, same as you." Martin comes back out with the papers and a different expression than before. Not angry now. Done. There is a difference. At 4:30, the backup generator alarm chirps for the first time. Not a full failure, just a warning on the status board, load fluctuation on the above-ground diesel unit, and delayed pump response in the fuel feed line. Nisha is on it before Martin reaches the utility door. She checks the underground controls, swears once under her breath, and points at a maintenance schematic clipped inside the cabinet. "The feed line pressure is dropping," she says. "Either the transfer pump above is choking, or the line took damage in the warehouse." Richard hears "above" and says "no" before anyone suggests a plan. Lena rounds on him. "You do understand everything in this room stops being fancy real fast if that generator quits." Grant looks from one face to another and says, "The battery bank will hold critical systems for maybe 8 hours if the cooling stays off and the cameras cycle." Nisha corrects him without looking up. 6 if scrubber draw rises. Less if the sewage system has to run hard. Martin checks the monitor feeds and finds one path that is not already packed with moving bodies. A lower service tunnel runs from the bunker utility room to a locked pump enclosure beneath Bay 2. From there, a ladder goes up into the warehouse mechanical alcove where the fuel transfer controls sit. It is close, dirty, and narrow, but it keeps us out of the admin office where we watched Pete die. "I go," Martin says. Lena says, "Not alone." Nisha says, "I know the pump housing," I hear myself say. "I am coming too." Richard snaps his head toward me. No. I look at him for the first time all day without caring what title sits over his office door. You do not get to use that tone anymore. He has no answer to that, just surprise. We leave Grant and Richard in the bunker with strict instructions from Martin to open nothing for nobody and keep cameras on the service hatch at all times. Lena takes one pistol, Martin the shotgun, Nisha a flashlight and tool roll, me the pry bar and an extra light. The service tunnel door opens behind a rack of reserve water drums in the utility room. Cool air hits first, then the smell of wet concrete, oil, and old dust. The tunnel is only tall enough to stand straight in the center. Pipes run along one wall, cable trays along the other. Water beads on the concrete and drips from a bend in the overhead fire line. The whole place carries sound badly. Every boot scuff comes back thin and wrong, as if more people are moving with us a half step out of sync. Nobody talks much because there is nothing useful to say. Martin leads, Nisha behind him with the schematic folded in her back pocket. I stay third. Lena last, checking behind every 30 feet, though there is nowhere for anything to hide but shadow and valve recesses. Halfway down the tunnel, we hear tapping ahead. Not random. Metal on metal. A weak pattern, then silence, then again. Martin raises one hand and we stop. Nisha angles her flashlight low. The beam catches a boot at floor level through the grate of the pump enclosure door. "Who is there?" Martin calls, voice flat. A man answers through the grate in a whisper that frays at the edges. "Help me, please." It is one of the truck mechanics. Name patch says Ruiz when we get close enough to see. His leg is pinned under a fallen metal panel inside the enclosure, and there is blood dried down one sleeve where something tore him earlier. He is awake, pale and trying very hard not to sound desperate, which makes it worse. The enclosure above him must have dropped a side rack when the warehouse floor shook from forklift impacts or truck collisions or who knows what else. Lena crouches by the grate. What happened? Ruiz blinks at her once, slow, then points upward. People started fighting, then not fighting. I came down to shut the line. Panel fell. There are noises in the alcove, sometimes right over me. Martin studies the wound on his arm through the grate. "How did you get cut?" Ruiz looks at it as if he forgot it existed. Chain hook. I think. Martin does not move to open the door. He just watches the man breathe, watches the shape of the sleeve, the color of the skin around the tear. Ruiz understands what that means after a few seconds and starts shaking his head too hard. "No," he says. "No. Not that. It was metal." "Please." Nisha kneels, peers through and says quietly, "It could be metal." Lena says, "And it could not." Time is moving while we talk. The generator alarm in the back of my head keeps ticking. Martin makes the call nobody wants and everybody sees coming. He slides a gallon jug of water through the lower grate gap, sets a flashlight beside it, and tells Ruiz if we can restore the line and clear the alcove. We will come back with leverage bars and a jack. Ruiz stares at the water instead of any of us. Then he nods once because men say yes to cruel compromises when the alternative is immediate abandonment. We move on. Nobody says the obvious part out loud. The ladder into the mechanical alcove is bolted to the wall behind a second hatch. Nisha climbs first because she knows what she is looking at. I follow because Martin says the pump panel will need a second pair of hands, and Lena stays low with him to cover the hatch. The alcove above is hotter than the tunnel and full of a burned rubber smell that catches in the throat. One fluorescent strip still flickers over the transfer manifold. The other has gone dark. The pump assembly hums, then grinds, then hums again. The flex line nearest the intake valve is split at one coupling, spraying diesel in a fine mist across the concrete lip beneath it. Not much, but enough to lose pressure. Nisha shuts the line, wipes the fitting with a rag, and swears again. It got hit by something, probably when the forklift hit the rack. Above the alcove wall, I can hear the warehouse proper. Distant scraping, a crash, then dragging steps that stop and start with no pattern I can call human anymore. I keep my eyes on the opening between stacked pallets because I do not want to be surprised by a face leaning over it. "Clamp," Nisha says. I pass her the clamp from the tool roll. She works fast, not frantic, just practiced. Cut damaged section, refit, torque, reseal, test. The kind of competence that becomes its own calm even while everything else comes apart. Then a body falls from above into the far end of the alcove hard enough to make both of us jerk around. It is not one of the dead, not yet. It is a living man, or close enough to count for the moment. Suit pants, dress shoes, shirt open at the collar, one side of his face bruised purple. Hands shaking so badly he cannot keep hold of the railing. He must have crawled over to reach the ledge. He looks at me with total confusion for half a second before I recognize him. Victor Sayer, one of the senior partners, not Richard's level, above him. He tries to say something, and only half of it comes out. Below. Open. Open it. He takes one step and nearly goes down. There is blood all over one calf where the fabric is torn through. I do not need Martin beside me to know what that means in this moment. Victor sees me looking and starts talking faster. It was a cut. Loading bay steel. Listen to me. There are files upstairs. There are people coming for the site. Do not leave Richard in control. Nisha never stops working the clamp. Martin, she calls low toward the hatch. We have company. Martin is up the ladder in 2 seconds. He sees Victor, the torn leg, the face, the eyes, and the distance between us all. Nothing dramatic passes through him. Just a clean, brutal assessment. Victor reaches for him anyway. Kroll, thank God. Get me below. Martin raises the shotgun, not to fire, just to stop movement. No closer. Victor freezes, then laughs once, disbelieving. Ugly. You think I am one of them? Lena appears behind Martin with the pistol ready but low. She takes one look at Victor's leg and says nothing. For a few seconds, the only sounds are the repaired pump line cycling and the scrape of movement in the warehouse above the alcove. Victor looks from face to face, searching for somebody weaker than the others. He lands on me because men like him always assume the office worker is the weak hinge. Owen, he says, suddenly softer. You know me. You know what I built. There is a second safe here. Satellite gear, route plans. Get me downstairs and I can get you all out. It is a good pitch if I have not spent the last hour reading how little room his world makes for mine. I say, you built a site with no space for the people who keep it running. Something closes in his expression at that. Not shame. Calculation. He switches approach at once. Then do not make this moral, he says. Make it practical. Behind him something scrapes over corrugated metal. Closer now. Martin chambers a shell, back away from the hatch. Victor does not. He steps once more toward us. Whether from fear or entitlement, I cannot tell, and that is enough. Martin fires. The blast inside the alcove is so loud, it blanks everything else for a second. Victor drops hard against the wall and slides down out of view below the ledge line. Nobody speaks. Nisha finishes tightening the coupling with her jaw set tight and the muscles in her forearm rigid as cable. Then she opens the line and watches the gauge recover into green. The dragging steps above change direction, drawn by the sound. Move, Martin says. We move. Back in the tunnel, with the hatch sealed, nobody mentions Ruiz because the choice ahead of us has already made the choice behind us harder. When we reach the pump enclosure door again, the flashlight we left by the grate is on its side and the water jug is empty. Ruiz is still there, still pinned, eyes wide open in the beam. But something in the way he watches us has gone slack in the wrong places. One hand taps the concrete beside his head again and again. Not from intention, just repetition. Martin does not stop this time. Lena does. Only for 1 second. Long enough to look through the grate and understand. Then she follows us on without a word. We get back below just before 6. Richard is furious we took longer than he expected, and relieved in a way he tries not to show. Grant says 2 exterior cameras are out, and 1 rooftop feed went black after a power surge. Nisha reports the generator is stable for now, but the line needs a full replacement soon, and the upper manifold area is unsafe. Martin says there are men moving in the warehouse who are not just warehouse staff anymore. Richard asks if Victor is with us. Martin says no. Richard does not ask again. Night underground does not feel like night until the first full silence between mechanical sounds. No traffic outside, no phone vibration from a pocket, no routine building noise from the city around us. Just filtered air, compressor hum, distant bumps transmitted through concrete, and the awareness that nothing normal remains overhead. Lena insists on a watch rotation before anyone sleeps. Martin first, then me, then Nisha, then her. Grant asks where Richard fits. She says Richard can sleep because men who keep secrets all day are usually useless at 3 in the morning. Nobody argues with that. I take the smallest bunk room because I do not trust the luxury suites. Too much soft light, too much space, too much reminder of who this place was built for. The staff room has 2 fold-down cots, metal lockers, and a low ceiling that makes more sense. I sit on the edge of one cot with my shoes still on and look at my phone even though it has no service, and the battery is under 40%. 22 missed messages from workgroup chats, 5 from my sister, 1 from my landlord, 3 news alerts frozen half-loaded, and nothing new since 2:13 in the afternoon. I type a message to my sister anyway. I am alive. Underground, East Harbor. Do not come here. Stay inside if you can. It does not send. I leave it unsent because deleting it feels worse. When my watch shift starts, the bunker feels smaller. Richard is asleep in the master suite with the door half closed. Grant is at the kitchen island with a laptop open, pretending to review inventories while he actually stares at one static camera feed for long stretches. Nisha is in the utility room checking gauges again because skilled people make rounds when fear will not let them rest. Martin hands me the shotgun for 10 minutes while he uses the restroom, and that piece of metal suddenly makes the whole bunker seem thin, as if one poor grip could ruin everybody below. Nothing happens for almost an hour, and then the outside line rings on the security console. Not the public landline. That died earlier. A dedicated encrypted signal routed through the site relay. Grant is on his feet before I can call anyone. He stares at the blinking light, then at me. That means somebody authorized is at the outer post. Martin comes in drying his hands on a towel and sees the light too. Do not touch it. Richard appears from the hall already awake, hair disordered, shirt untucked. No sign he has been sleeping well despite the room he chose. Answer it. Martin says. No. Richard says, if it is recovery. We answer. Lena comes in from the side hall with the pistol at her hip and no patience left. If it is recovery, why are they using site relay in the middle of this instead of opening the gate? The line keeps blinking. One steady pulse. Pause. One steady pulse. Nisha steps into the room last and wipes her hands on a rag. Put it on speaker and nobody says anything first. That wins because it is the smartest version of the bad options. Grant presses accept. Static hisses once. Then a man's voice comes through, clear enough to sound close. Warehouse 9 Continuity Team, respond. This is Dunbar Asset Security Retrieval Unit 6. Identify active leadership and confirm site integrity. Richard moves for the mic. Martin puts a hand on his shoulder hard enough to stop him. Nobody answers yet. The man on the line waits 2 seconds. We have thermal on lower exhaust and intermittent load signatures on auxiliary power. We know the site is occupied. Respond. Richard shrugs Martin off and reaches the mic before anybody else. Richard Vale, Regional Finance Director, site compromised above ground, continuity shelter occupied, awaiting extraction. There is a pause on the line. Then the man says, Copy Vale. Confirm principal count, Richard glances around the room, lies without hesitation. 3 principals, 3 support. Lena laughs once under her breath. The voice says, negative capacity for 6 on first pull. Hold inside until route assessment. Martin steps to the mic, then, how many on your team? Another pause. Smaller this time? Enough. That answer changes the whole room. Martin says, what is your entry route? The voice says, need to know. Then the line clicks dead. Nobody speaks for a full 5 seconds after that. Lena breaks first. That is not recovery. That is acquisition. Richard rounds on her. It is our people. Your people, she says. Not mine. Grant is sweating now, visible even under the monitor light. If they know the exhaust signature, they have already reached the exterior utility structures. Nisha looks toward the systems room, which means if they want us out, they can start by cutting intake. We make the first real group decision right then. No more pretending Richard is in charge because of his job title. Martin says it plain. From now on, every response is by group agreement or not at all. Richard objects. Martin lifts the shotgun enough to settle the objection without needing to say more. Grant says nothing because he has already understood who the room will follow when hard choices stack up. The rest of the night becomes preparation. Lena and I move food, water, and tools into packs that can be carried if we need to leave fast. Nisha draws the storm utility route from memory and from the printed appendix I found. Martin checks every weapon twice and shows me how to load the shotgun 1 shell at a time without fumbling the tube. Grant gets assigned to battery management and inventory because nobody wants him near communications, now that outside voices have started speaking his language. Richard stays useful only because he knows code sequences and hidden storage locations. Every time he provides one, Lena writes it down so nobody needs to ask him twice. At 3 a.m, the rooftop intake pressure drops for 9 seconds and then comes back. Not enough to suffocate us, enough to prove Nisha is right. Whoever is above can reach the site's life support. At 5:10, the same encrypted line blinks again. This time, Martin answers without waiting for permission. Speak. The same man comes on. Route compromised. Dawn movement expected on all east corridors. Recommend shelter hold until noon window. Martin says, state team size. The man ignores it. Be advised, support personnel will be evaluated on pickup. Principals prepare IDs and continuity packets. Lena takes the mic out of Martin's hand before he can react and says, go to hell. Then she kills the line. It would almost be funny in another life. Morning underground comes only because the clocks say so. The bunker lighting stays warm and unchanged unless we dim it manually. We eat protein bars and a small amount of canned fish at the kitchen island, while the camera feeds show pale gray daylight creeping across a warehouse district that looks half-bombed without any bombs having fallen. Trucks sit abandoned. Small fires have burned out into black stains. Bodies move between trailers, some aimless, some clustering around every fresh burst of motion. On the north ramp camera, 3 armed men in gray tactical jackets appear just after 7. One carries bolt cutters, one a long gun, one a hard case. No insignia except a small black patch on the shoulder I cannot read. They move with care, not rush. One checks corners while another studies the ramp door with a handheld scanner. Recovery team or raider, the result for us feels the same. Grant sees them and goes still in a guilty way I have noticed twice already. Once when the line first rang, and once when Richard lied about principal count. I watch him longer than I mean to. When he senses it, he looks away too fast. Martin sees it too. What did you send out? Grant blinks. Nothing. Martin steps closer. Wrong answer. Richard cuts in. He sent nothing without my authorization. That is not a denial. Lena slams a palm on the island. How much do those men know about us? Grant's voice gets thin. Only the existence of occupied site, maybe projected numbers, maybe system status from relay handshake. Nisha stares at him. Projected numbers? He finally says it. I was told to maintain continuity logs if emergency protocols were ever activated. I ask, and who gets those logs? He swallows. Executive protection. Martin takes his laptop, powers it down, removes the battery, and slides the whole thing across the counter out of Grant's reach. No more messages. Outside. The armed men on camera move toward the admin block. One of them disappears from view near the office wall, where the hidden elevator plate sits on the other side. That makes my mouth go dry in a practical, immediate way. If they know the wall, Grant told them, or Richard did, or some automated record did the talking for both. We hear the first real drilling sound at 8:16, not on the bunker door itself, on the wall cavity in the admin office above the hidden elevator access. The camera feed shows the men working in pairs while one watches the corridor. They are not trying random surfaces. They know exactly where the concealed mechanism runs. Martin mutes the feed. Storm route. Richard says, no so sharply it almost overlaps him. If we go into that tunnel without support, we die in the city. Lena points at the monitor with the armed men opening our wall with tools meant for this exact job. If we stay, we die in your waiting room. Nisha adds the piece that matters. And if they cut intake again while that drill runs, we lose time we cannot buy back. Richard turns to me then. Maybe because I found the file? Maybe because he still thinks office workers can be recruited by procedure. Owen. Be reasonable. That line decides it for me more than anything else. Because reasonable in his mouth means useful to him. The only reasonable thing left, I say, is leaving before somebody else decides what we are worth. Grant sinks into a chair and covers his face with both hands for 1 second. When he looks up again, he seems younger than before. Stripped down to what he always was under the tailored jacket. A scared middleman who mistook access for belonging. There is a second storage locker on the storm route, he says quietly. It has filters, maintenance suits, 2 emergency breather masks, and route markers. Richard told me not to mention it unless extraction failed. Richard stares at him as if betrayal has become offensive only now that it cuts upward. Martin does not waste a second on the argument. Show us. The storm utility tunnel entrance is hidden behind a removable panel in the cold storage room off the back pantry. Colder down there, louder with pipe resonance, and narrower than the service tunnel we used yesterday. The first 100 feet slope gently down before turning east beneath the street grid. It is not a sewer exactly, more a mixed runoff and maintenance trunk line with raised concrete ledges on both sides and a central channel carrying a slow ribbon of black water that reflects our lights in broken strips. Nisha leads because she knows plant layouts and because confined infrastructure does not seem to bother her the way it bothers me. Martin goes first on the right ledge with the shotgun. Lena on the left with a pistol and a pack twice as heavy as mine because she refuses to let anybody else carry more than she does. I stay behind Nisha with food, tools, printed maps, and the crowbar strapped to my bag. Grant follows close because now that he has chosen motion over Richard, he is afraid to be separated from the only people who might still let him matter. Richard comes last and hates every inch of it. We leave the bunker lights on behind us, not out of sentiment, out of calculation. Let the men above think we are still waiting under soft lamps and stocked wine. The tunnel smells of rain rot, fuel traces, old mineral residue, and the stale closed-air note that infrastructure gets when it is used rarely and inspected even less. Our flashlight beams pick up spray-painted arrows every 30 feet, faded almost to nothing under grime. Right at the first junction, Grant points to a recessed steel locker half hidden behind conduit. Inside are the promised filter cartridges, 2 breather masks, bolt cutters, chemical light sticks, and 1 hard plastic case containing site cash in sealed envelopes. Emergency bribe money, transit money, or proof somebody planning this understood that the world above might survive in a worse form than law. Martin takes the cash without comment and hands the case to me. Not 2 minutes later, the air through the tunnel changes. A faint rush, then a dragging moan along the pipe curve behind us. Nisha stops and looks back. "Intake shift," she says. "They are altering pressure somewhere." Richard mutters, "They would not do that if they wanted the site intact." Lena says, "Maybe intact means empty." We keep moving. At the second bend, the ledge narrows around a collapsed section where masonry has dropped from the ceiling and blocked half the channel. One by one, we pass packs across, edge over the rubble, and brace each other by forearm and shoulder because the slime on the concrete offers no traction. Richard slips first, of course. 1 polished shoe skids, and he nearly drops into the runoff before Grant catches his sleeve with both hands. For a moment, the man who ranked him by usefulness hangs full weight from the arm of the clerk he meant to abandon in style. Nobody says anything about that either. The next problem is human. Voices ahead, muffled by distance and tunnel turns. But human. 2 men at least. Maybe 3. Martin kills his flashlight at once, and we all follow. The dark is complete enough that I can hear water ticking off my own pant cuff and the plastic buckle of Lena's pack tapping once against the wall every time she shifts weight. The voices get clearer, not company security, scavengers maybe. Local men who found the utility access and came down hoping to avoid the streets. One complains about the smell, another says to keep moving because the canal outlet should be close. Then there is a scraping drag and a wet impact that does not sound like a boot. Martin creeps forward until the bend gives him a view, then comes back and touches 2 fingers to his own shoulder, then points ahead and makes a low, circling motion. Not just men, infected with them. We do not have room for a real fight in that tunnel. 1 gunshot could turn the whole place into panic and ricochet. Martin leans close and whispers the plan into Lena's ear, then mine, then Nisha's. Light sticks thrown past the voices to draw attention down the wrong branch. Then we move fast through the service crossover on the left while confusion does the rest. It works until the second man sees us anyway. The chemical light cracks bright green when Martin throws it. Voices shout. 1 man yells, "Who is there?" Something snarls or coughs or makes some wet, broken noise I never want to hear close again. Then a flashlight beam slashes across the main trunk and catches Lena halfway through the crossover gap. "Stop!" the man shouts. No one stops. A shot cracks off concrete behind me and chips grit into my neck. Martin fires once in return from the darkness. Not aimed to kill, I think. More to make them duck. The tunnel erupts in echo and movement. I squeeze through the crossover, scraping my pack against the wall while somebody behind me curses, then screams in a voice that turns jagged all at once as the infected reach him. We run bent over along the side passage for maybe 40 yards before it dumps us back into the main trunk farther east. Grant is crying without sound as he runs, face twisted, and Richard is finally too scared to preserve dignity. He grabs the wall with both hands every few steps to keep from sliding into the channel. Nobody helps him because nobody can spare a hand. When we stop at last, Martin counts heads with his flashlight beam. 1, 2, 3, 4, then swears. Richard is not there. For half a second, no one moves, not because we care in the simple way, but because leaving a man behind, even that man, has weight. Then we hear him shouting from the branch we just left. Distant, furious, terrified. His voice cuts off in a burst of other noise. Then nothing we can separate into words. Lena looks at Martin. Martin looks at the tunnel mouth, then at the limited shells left on his belt. No, he says, that is all. We keep moving with 4. The canal outlet should open beneath an abandoned service lot near the water treatment spur. Every route in this city now seems to depend on verbs that have lost authority in one day. Still, the map and tunnel markers line up enough to let us believe we are close when the air begins to smell less stale and more like outside rain, river mud, and smoke. The final hatch is not where the printed appendix says it is. The main ladder well has collapsed under some surface impact, and the rungs end at a plug of broken concrete and bent rebar. Grant stares up at it with a blank expression, as if betrayal by architecture is the insult that finally empties him. Nisha does not waste time on despair. She traces the drainage flow, studies the wall seams, and finds a maintenance bypass plate on the right side, tucked behind a rusted conduit bundle. 4 bolts, old but movable. I take the crowbar, Martin the pry tool. Lena holds the light, and together we wrench the plate free, one squeal at a time, until cold daylight pushes through a slit, no wider than a crawl space. Beyond it is a culvert running under a chain-link maintenance yard beside the canal. Not safe, not pretty, open enough to matter. Martin goes first, then Lena with packs, then Nisha. I shove the cash case and shotgun shells through after them and turn to help Grant because he has frozen again, staring back down the tunnel we came from. Maybe listening for Richard, maybe listening for the bunker he sold pieces of himself to. Move, I tell him. He does not. Not dramatic refusal, not speech, just failure. His knees soften and he sits down hard on the wet concrete ledge, hands hanging between them, eyes fixed on the dark behind us. I grab his jacket and pull. He comes half up, then sags again. Martin crawls back enough to see and says the hard thing in the hard tone. Leave him. Grant hears that, finally looks at me. I sent the occupancy logs, he says, voice flat now. I thought if I stayed useful, there would be a place for me. The confession hangs there uselessly because all of us already knew it in shape, if not wording. I tell him, stand up and keep paying for it somewhere else. That lands where guilt and fear could not. He gets one foot under him, then the other. I push. Lena grabs his wrist from the other side, and together we drag him through the bypass opening into gray daylight that feels too wide after the tunnel. The city above the canal is not loud anymore in the normal sense. It is full of separate sounds with too much space between them. Distant alarms running on weak batteries, water slapping concrete, a truck horn stuck somewhere upriver, one gunshot far off, then none for a long while. Smoke drifts over the industrial roofs in flat sheets. Gulls wheel above the canal and keep landing on things I do not want to inspect closely. We cut through the maintenance yard, bent low behind rusting drums and broken pallet stacks until we reach the fence. Martin uses the bolt cutters from the locker. Lena watches the road. Nisha studies the buildings across the canal and picks the cleanest route with the least movement. Grant stands where I place him and does exactly what he is told for the first time since I have known him. When the gap in the fence is wide enough, we slip through one at a time into a service alley lined with shuttered garages and 2 overturned delivery carts. From there I can see, just in the distance, the top half of Warehouse 9 beyond the roofs. No sign of the bunker, of course. Just a square industrial shell holding a secret beneath it that has already failed the test. It was built to imagine. We do not stop there. There is no point. Survival in the first day of a collapse seems to mean refusing every urge to stand still and evaluate too long. Lena wants west because her brother lives near the old freight apartments, and she still has hope he made it out. Nisha wants north toward the clinic district because her aunt worked nights there and she cannot leave without checking. Martin says the river roads will clog with stranded traffic and trouble and recommends cutting through the rail maintenance corridor first, then deciding at elevation. Grant says nothing until I ask him directly where he is headed. He looks at the ground and says he does not know. For once, that answer sounds honest. I think of my sister on the other side of the city, of the unsent message still sitting on a dead network, of the bunker with the wine room and the hidden contracts, and the polished counters where men plan to outwait disaster under hired protection. I think of Pete in the office, Ruiz under the panel, Victor in the alcove trying to turn morality into math, Richard vanishing in the tunnel that he would have sent the rest of us through first if he had managed to stay above the choice. Then I look at the 3 people still standing near me and understand something simple and ugly. Safe places are only as good as the people beside you. And most of the expensive ones are built by men who have already decided who is furniture. So I make the only choice that feels clean enough to carry. Rail corridor first, I say. Higher ground, fewer blind turns, and we stay together until one route is impossible. Lena nods once. Nisha adjusts her pack and checks the pistol grip at her side, even though she still looks more comfortable with a wrench. Martin takes point without comment. Out. Grant lifts one of the heavier bags before anyone asks him to, which does not erase anything, but does put weight on his own shoulders where it belongs. We move. By mid-morning, we are crossing a dead siding yard, where boxcars sit open and silent under a pale sky streaked with smoke. The city keeps making its new sounds around us. Somewhere glass falls in a long shiver. Somewhere a man shouts for help until the shout breaks and does not come back. Somewhere an engine turns over again and again without catching. We do not chase any of it. We keep a steady pace, we check corners, we share water in measured pulls, and we do not talk more than necessary, because every choice now has to fit inside the few facts we actually know. The bunker is behind us. Its soft lighting, its imported food, its hidden codes, its small, ugly math. Maybe the armed men take it. Maybe they flood it, strip it, burn it, or sit in it until the filters fail. It is not my problem anymore. I have spent one day too close to the kind of wealth that plans comfort before conscience, and I am done hiding under a warehouse, so people above my pay grade can decide whether I count as cargo. When we reach the embankment above the rail yard, we stop only long enough to look over the city, smoke columns in 3 directions, abandoned cars packed at the bridge entrances, scattered movement in the streets below. No helicopters, no organized convoys, no visible line where order is waiting to return, just distance, damage, and enough open ground ahead to keep us honest. Lena shades her eyes and studies the west blocks. Nisha checks north. Martin scans rooftops. Grant stands a few feet back, quiet now, carrying his load without complaint. I look east once, back toward the warehouses, and then turn away for good. There is no clean ending to a first day like this. No speech, no lesson, no neat promise that the right people survive and the wrong ones get buried under their own plans. There is only the next stretch of ground, the next building we may or may not trust, the next hour earned the hard way. That is enough for now, so I tighten the straps on my pack, adjust the pry bar against my shoulder, and follow the others along the rail line into the ruined city, leaving the luxury bunker to whatever kind of men still believe comfort can save them.